Okay, so the first thing that I like to do when drawing an eye is to actually put some white in where the highlight is going to be, even if it's not completely white. I like to put some white down first to protect the paper, and then I can always go back over it with some blues and greys or whatever to make it more realistic and to blend it in a little. But if you don't put the white down to start with, then it's difficult to get back that white paper if you want it. So I'm just lightening some of my outline a little so I don't get that stuck on there. And I've got a nice sharp pencil, which, by the way, I will always be using a good sharp, very sharp pencil throughout this unless I tell you otherwise. So I'm using a medium to firm pressure, and I'm just going to carefully just wash on some white, which you probably can't actually see what I'm doing, but I promise it is going on. So just make sure that if you're not sure if you've covered an area, just go back over it a little bit. It won't hurt. And then just work up anywhere where the highlight is going to be. And I don't like to erase all of it at once, otherwise I forget where I'm going. On those the whitest bits, if you've got them, then I might just press it a little bit firmer, just to really make sure I keep those areas white. And you might not be able to see. You might have to tip your head slightly. Sometimes if you look at your paper at a different angle with the light shining on it, it just helps you to see where you have actually put that pencil down. So now I've got some white protecting my paper. I'm going to start by using my lightest colours and working my way up. Once I've got down a few base layers of the lightest colours within the eye, the greens and whatnot, I will also start just to build up a little bit of the dark just around it, so we can help gauge the colours that we actually need and the tonal values, because drawing it on white and having white next to it will look very different to when we put that dark black around it. So you might think, well, why aren't you putting the dark down first? And that is actually a very good question. I like to get a layer or two of the light down first before putting the dark around, for the simple reason so I don't accidentally drag the dark onto those base layers of the pencil, because if you've got a few layers down and you get a bit in, it's easier to kind of cover it up or remove it, whereas if you do it straight onto the paper and then you're trying to cover it, it can be a bit more challenging. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting down some of this lightest green. So I've got a middle verde green, and I've chosen this one as the lightest one because it's kind of a nice pastel-y light green, which we have obviously got in a few places. Now I'm not just going to be putting it down in those few places. I'm actually going to use this as a base layer, just lightly around most of that eye area, basically anywhere except where we've put down the white. Obviously leave that, and I'm just going to map in my outline of my eye, and because it's a nice light colour, if I make a mistake it doesn't matter, it's easier to kind of sort out, and we can then build up those darker layers and the other colours on top. just a nice good base layer. Now, because we press quite firmly with the white, if you get a bit on it, because you're doing it just gently, and as you can see, my pencil, I'm not holding it upright like this, I'm holding it flatter at an angle. So although it's sharp, it will gradually kind of wear down one side of the pencil a little bit, and that's okay, because when you come up against that white where you had to use quite a firm pressure, you will find, because you're pressing gently like this at an angle, that you will find that edge, even though you can't see it, it won't go over the top of it, which is the beauty of using firm pressure with the white to start with. I'm just gonna gently work my way around. Now I've obviously put some lines down here. Now some of them I don't want to lose, but because I'm going to have darker marks on them, so I'm just going to gently just dab them slightly though, so they will blend in, and I can always, it's like a line there, I can just pop that in as a marker point, with a bit of a firmer pressure, just so I don't lose it. Now when I'm washing, I'm trying to go around the eye, so I'm doing little backwards and forwards strokes, as you can see, and I'm just trying to go around. So even though it's a base layer and we want to try and keep it nice and smooth, again, although they're not going to be green, if I just use a fairly light pressure just to mark in where they are, just so I don't lose them, and I don't want to put too much green there because it's quite brown, but just a very light layer. But yes, if I go round the eye, even at this base layer, it'll help to start shaping it. So I'm not going across, because it's not, the lines that you'll see mostly on this are obviously curving out from that centre point where the pupil is. So just take your time. These base layers are often the longest parts to this, because you're working out where things go, and you particularly on the smooth surface, you want a nice real smooth base layer, which by using a light pressure and just kind of going backwards and forwards, or sometimes you might want to change direction just to smooth it off slightly, and that's okay. That's nothing to worry about. Just helps to get a good start to the picture. It's better to take your time doing this bit. It will make it easier later on. So leave the dark pupil. I'm going to just pop that in just a moment. So I'm not going to put any of that green on the dark pupil, but I am going to have it coming out from it, even in those more sort of purpley brown areas, because this is such a light colour. It will work well with the other colours that we put on the top. The other thing that you can start to think about, even on this base layer, is the tonal values. So I'm just redrawing in that bottom shape just so I don't lose it. You can start thinking, obviously we've got darker bit coming out of the pupil, so I can always go back over, add a layer or two, or just press just slightly firmer, not too much, just to gently start modelling in a little bit where we want it a bit darker. And at the top. And if you make a mistake and you lose some of the white, don't worry, I will at the end explain some methods you could use to resolve that if need be. So don't panic if it doesn't quite go to plan. It happens to us all. And then, yeah, just keep it nice and light in those real lightest areas, or where it's fairly brown or orangey brown. It doesn't matter too much. That's obviously going to get into the dark bit there. I need to reshape that. That's okay. I can come back to that in a minute. That's no major drama, but just by doing that, we're just beginning, and this is just the beginning, to start shaping that eye a little bit and start to model it. So I've got down the middle verdigris green just as a base coat. Now obviously want to start darkening that green up, but I am conscious that I would like to just mark in where that pupil is and get that outline just drawn in. Now I'm not going to go straight in with black, and the reason being is if I make a mistake, it can be hard to remove. So what I personally like to do is I like to go for a grey. So I've got a Payne's Grey 60% here. So although it's darker, but it's just not quite so dark and harsh as the black. Again, obviously I've made sure I've got a nice sharp point to my pencil for this, and I'm just going to very carefully plot in where I want that pupil, just to try and make sure I've got the shape of it as I want, because although we've put down the outline on the paper, it's very easy just to slightly misshape something when you're putting the outline down. Get proportion wrong, even just slightly. So it's always good just to, well, at all stages, but particularly if you do it at this first stage, you can correct any mistakes then a bit more easily than if you leave them to the end. So once I'm a bit more sure that I have got it right, then obviously I can just fill that in a little bit more. Press a bit firmer just to kind of make sure I'm happy with that overall shape and where it's going. Now, the other thing that I like to do is, as you'll see, I've got a few bits of pencil on there. Let me just see if I can find it. I like to use like a brush, horsehair brush, and just sweep them away rather than using my hand, so I don't smudge or get my finger marks everywhere. So now I've roughly marked that in. It's best to try and do it a bit smaller than bigger, because it's very easy just to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. If you start off slightly smaller, you can always go back and just tweak it and make it bigger. But obviously if you do it too big to start with, then it's harder to make it smaller. Now the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to, with this Payne's Grey 60% again, is I'm just going to very carefully and just gently, I'm not pressing too hard, because there is a lot of browns and other colours going on in here, but I'm just going to use it just to kind of mark back in again the outside edge, just to make sure I've got the shape of it right, and it will help contain that eye, and then we can start building up the inside and the outside of it then, because it can be quite easy to lose your way in amongst the dark bits. So always good just to get it down. I like to call it my road map at this stage, and creating my little journey of where I'm going and how I'm going to get to that end point, it's these base layers are key really to the way that I work. Again, just look at those shapes. Don't assume that you know what it is. Do keep checking your reference through too. Here obviously we've got a light bit that I've drawn, so I want to just make sure I get that dark edge in there, and it actually will come out a bit wider, which we will come back and do with some greys and some browns in there. So just literally want to make sure that I've got an edge in, and I'm going to just then build up a little bit in the middle, but not all the way, because obviously I want to build up this dark area too. I think what actually I might do at this point as well is, because I don't want to end up accidentally losing that light bit to the left of the eye, is I'm just going to draw around that other edge. Again, you could pop down some white to protect the paper if you want to. Again, it's not white, so you don't want to press too firmly with it. But what I might do is just put a fairly light layer. That's not even my white. That's not a good start, is it? What have I done with my white pencil? Here it is. It's very easy to muddle up the buff titanium and the white, but I don't want the buff because it's a bit more creamy, whereas this colour here is a bit more bluey grey to it. So I'm just going to put a light layer down. I'm not pressing too hard, but just a light layer, so that if it gets other pencil on it, it'll be easier just to lighten it down or take it off. So, and we can obviously then go back over, because we've not pressed too hard with it. It'll be easy to blend other greys and blues over the top as we need to. So now I said I'd come back and do the outside edge a little bit more, but I might just actually just pop a little bit in just to get me started, particularly on this side where it kind of changes colours. So I'm not pressing too hard, a light to medium pressure, and I'm just kind of marking in where the darkest bits are really. Again, you can see here it starts looking at the angle of which way you're washing. We will come back and be a bit more precise. And if it starts to get a bit light, obviously just reduce your pressure. Because we can build it up. So I'm just roughly just kind of marking in those darkest bits just to start the plan. And just be careful here, because obviously that does get lighter grey, which we'll come back to do, but and like I said, these bits that go into the white, I'm not going to get into that bit right this second on the edges, so I'm not going to go right up to the that bottom edge. I will come back and do that a bit more carefully in a minute, but just I'm going to put it's a lighter grey there, so I'm just going to wash just a little bit just to start plotting. And as you can see, I'm washing in lines away from the eye, and I'm kind of going around. You can follow the line of the hair, that gives you an idea of where you're going. And what I'm going to just do up here is around this part of the eye. I'm just going to wash, just the light wash. Again, I'm not going to get too close to the edge at this stage and get those lines. I'm just going to go near the edge. We'll come back to doing the details later. This is literally just about the base layers, thinking about where things are, tonal values. So I don't want to go too close, but just up near the edge a little bit. You can see how just by putting this darker bit around here and starting just to gently plan where things are going, what's going on, that green looks different compared to when there was no dark around here. And when here is where you'll see the shape, it's going up and around. You've got to think that the eye is obviously not flat, it's inside its socket. So you've got the eye socket, as it were, and you can see it's shaping around like, if I draw my lines, you can see it's shaping around like that. So I'm just going to just leave that, not go too close to that edge, just near it, and come back and fill that in, because this is a very dark area, and we will need blues, blacks, maybe some browns or reds to really rich and deepen up that colour, to get it not just looking flat, but like there's some richness to it. And again, I'm not going to go too far here, because you'll see it's starting to lighten up and change shape a bit. So again, I'm just trying to do a fairly smoothish layer, just get rid of some of that white of the paper showing through just a little bit. You can just go back over and smoothing it off a little bit. Again, I've got my pencil fairly flat to the paper when I do my washes. And then you can keep turning the pencil in your hand a little bit, so if it starts getting too flat on one edge, you can just rotate it round a little bit. That's just kind of given us a bit of a rough start without any details, just to start working out where it all is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start building up that green a little bit. So this time I'm going to go up a green, and I've got the chromium oxide green. Now I've chosen this green because it's quite similar in tone to some of these kind of mid areas of green on the eye, and we will be able to put some blue over it in the bluer areas, but also put some of the browny yellow colours over in those areas. It's kind of a mid-tone, so it will work quite well for working either way. So got a nice sharp pencil, and I'm just going to start with a light pressure first of all, just to gauge how much I want to put down. Now I'm working out from that pupil again. Now this bit here is quite light and bluey, so I'm not going to put it there, because this is fairly strong colour in comparison to what we've already put down. So I'm just going to gently wash some more in those mid-tone and dark tone areas. Now this bit here is obviously quite browny reds, and because we're pressing lightly, we will be able to go in and pop those over the top. Again, you can just now start to model that shape of the highlight a little bit. And just gently work your way. Like I said, you don't have to cover all of it. Leave those lightest bits showing through in places. And again, just remember which way you're washing. Just put, there's a little bit in here, so I'm just going to wash. Although that is lighter, just don't want harsh edges necessarily. You can just blend it out a little bit with a light pressure. Now it is quite dark on those edges, so I'm going to wash a bit here, just as a base layer. Start thinking about that shape a little bit, where those darker colours are going to go. And it's definitely dark up here. Now you will find that it's darker up on the top of the eye, above that highlight, because of the eyelid and the way it's casting a shadow down onto the eye. Now don't worry if you end up with like extra little lines and it's not quite as smooth. Don't worry, because we've got plenty more layers to go on the top to smooth things out a little bit. So it's particularly dark here, and I'm only going up to a medium pressure though. I'm not going to press too hard because we do have other colours to do, and I don't really want to obviously drag that grey in too much either, make it dirty. Hence why I put down a layer of pencil first, and also didn't go too dark until I've got some pencil protecting this paper. But you can already see it's not looking at the details yet. I am obviously trying to remember where, there's a few lines and bits in, but generally at this point I'm considering my tonal values a lot as I build up the colours. I can put the tiny incy details in at the end. Now, if you want to fade something out so you don't end up with a harsh line, just use a light pressure and just get softer and softer as you move away from it. If you need to do it again, just repeat the process and go back over, and then just reduce your pressure as you get to the edge. Just think about what shape you want around that white highlight as well. Some of it is a bit more faded in, so you can just go a bit softer over the edge. Other bits like here, it's a bit more of a harsh line. Again, just because you've used a colour once as well, it doesn't mean that you can't go back and add more later. So if you're not sure if you've added enough, don't worry, because we can always go back in and go add bits in later as we need to in different areas. And also it helps to smooth out and get that glassy effect as well. So don't forget just to gently sweep away any loose bits so that they don't ruin your paper. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I would like just to build up that darker area just a little bit, and I've got a dark indigo here, which is quite a blacky blue. So while I'm not using it completely black, I like having that element of blue in it. A nice cool colour, but just really adds something to it. So again, I've got sharp pressure, and I've got a medium, a sharp point, and a medium pressure, and I'm just going in those darkest sections. I'm not worrying about those hairs that are coming off into the white at this stage. I will come back and sort those out at the end. So just go roughly up to the edge, but you can see just by looking at that the difference now that we have, and obviously this will really help to gauge those tonal values in the actual eye. So here I'm just using a slightly lighter pressure because you'll notice it's not quite so dark under the eye. It's a bit more grey to it, so just using a nice light pressure in that area, just so we have got some dark, but not too dark. And just take your time in those bits and keep checking where it is darker and lighter, rather than those details, as we said before. There's quite a dark bit on the other side of that lighter bit, so press a little bit firmer there, and then I can just reduce my pressure a little bit as we come out. Just soften off a little bit there because it is a bit lighter in that middle bit. And go back to that kind of medium to firm pressure in this really darker bit. You'll notice you haven't completely filled the tooth of the paper. There will be some speckles showing through. That's okay. They will go with a few more layers and a nice sharp pencil. This pencil of mine's starting to get a little bit short now. I prefer a nice long pencil. So just making it slightly trickier for me. Again, like we said, I've not done the wispy bits. I've just kind of tried to go up to the rough edge of where we are. Now, where you want to be a bit more careful on the edge, you can hold your pencil a bit more upright to draw in a nice clean line carefully, if you wish. The other good thing about holding your pencil that way is if you happen to find any areas of the paper where you've got big blobs of white showing through, as it were, if you hold your pencil a bit more upright, even just using a gentle pressure, and if it's nice and sharp, it will just help to smooth out that tooth a little bit more, which, if you just got an imperfection in the paper or whatever, it just helps quite easily. It's a good way of fixing it. Like I said, I'm not doing loads of detail on this side at the moment, so just a light layer down here, just to kind of get some of those tones a bit more accurate. there are some darker bits just coming in here, so a little bit underneath, coming down. There we go. And again, just remember just to carefully just sweep away those loose bits so you don't dirty your paper. Now I'm also going to add a bit onto the pupil here, just carefully in those darkest bits, so I'm not pressing too hard. And again, you see it's not all the same tones. Some bits are darker, so you can go back over those bits or press slightly harder, and then a bit more gently on the other bits, like so. Now, I am also going to use some of this dark indigo, just to think about where some of these darker areas are on the eye, particularly in the shadow. We've got some blue within the green in this shadow bit, and it's obviously, like we said, blue's a nice cool colour, so that will really help with the shadow. Now I am going to use a very sharp pencil, but a really light pressure at this stage. I'm going in with a light pressure because I just want to gauge how much I actually need to put down, because I don't want to make it too dark. I just want to start thinking about where that dark area is just a little bit. So I am going really, really light, and also there is some brown in there as well that I'm going to want to put in, but I'm just kind of trying to get a bit of a base tonal value, just going slightly darker. And also here, this bit here, although it's not as dark as that top bit, there is definitely some blue tones in here, so I'm just going to add just a little bit into this section at the same time. Because you don't have to cover the whole eye, just look where those bluey tones are starting to creep in a little bit. And obviously we've got some coming into this bit as well. By using this, obviously this light pressure, I'm not completely covering it. It allows that nice light green to still show through. And like we said, there's definitely some browns in here, so I want to be able to get those in too. Now it is quite dark on this left edge here, so I'm going to bring that in a little bit and then just soften the edge off using a really light pressure as it starts to shape around the eye a little bit. By using a light pressure and just going back and forwards over it, you can just very gently build up the bits that you need to, and then obviously where it's really dark, like right on that edge, you can use a slightly firmer pressure, and then just gradually bring it into the eye in the bits that you need. Like I said, this is quite a bluey black, so we will be adding in others. We don't want this everywhere by any means, it's just kind of in those real darky bits, just very lightly. I'm going to put just a tad here, because where I'm going to put this red, sort of reddy brown down, it's a bit purpley. If we've got a tiny bit of the blue underneath there, then that's okay, because that red brown tones will kind of get that slight purpley effect, which there is some in there, so that's okay. It's quite dark here. I'm just going to add a touch more and blend it in a little bit. It is quite brown as well going on in here, so and then just obviously just sweep that away. So I've thought about the cooler colours with the bluey black, and what I'm going to do now is actually think about some of those warmer tones in the eye. So I'm going to go for a green ochre this time, and this is a very yellowy green, great for those kind of browny green areas we've got around this bottom bit here. There's some in the eye here, and then there's a few bits in other places. So I'm going to start with the obvious bit here, and if you look at those, we've kind of got those curved shapes in the eye, so I'm just going to map in those. They are browner, but this will be a good base layer for them, and then just gently down wash a bit over that where it's a bit browner here. This is obviously a warmer colour, so it will just warm that bit up a little bit, bring a bit more life to the eye as we build up those colours. And also there's a little browny green bit here, and this, we're going to wash a bit into this section coming out of the pupil here, and just a few odd strokes. We don't want loads because it is quite bluey in places, but just by having a few little bits will make it a little bit more realistic, add a bit more vibrancy, a bit more life to it. And as you can see, there's a few bits, if you look really carefully you will see a few bits of colour just coming up here as well in different places. Again, I'm still using the same washing motion around, almost like a bicycle wheel, I suppose, with the spokes, working your way from the middle outwards. And there's definitely some at this bottom edge here, to that greeny bit. A few bits, like I said, I'm not covering it all because it's definitely not all got such a warm yellowy green to it, but there is definitely elements of it, should we say. And again, building up those layers really helps to create that shine to it as well. Real smooth it out, and by using that really sharp pencil, that will help to keep it nice and smooth. Now I'm going to go a little bit darker now with the olive brown. So this is a greeny brown, and I'm going to use this on those darker kind of markings we've got going on in the eye, and on some of this edge here. Now some of it is a bit reddy as well, but there is brown in here, so we're going to put the brown first because the red's quite a strong colour that I'm going to be using. So I want to get a bit of this down first, and there's definitely some brown on this edge, so I'm using kind of a medium pressure in those darker bits and into the edge. It's okay if it overlaps slightly into that dark edge that we've got around the eye. We've got that darker bit here, and again it's a few of those kind of little lines. They don't go all the way from the middle to the edge at all on this eye. You might just see a few little patches of this kind of browny tone, and I'm definitely going to put some coming from the middle of the eye. Again, I'm not doing covering the whole thing because I want to leave some of those underneath colours shining through. So doing individual strokes, as it were, where you go down, lift your pencil up and then bring them down, rather than backwards and forwards, can work quite well. Where obviously you want more down, then you can wash a bit, like up here is quite browny. So I'm definitely gonna wash a bit into that section. But yes, here on this lighter bit, yeah, just kind of do a few individual strokes just to really give that eye a bit more interest and break it up a bit. And again, there's quite a few browner bits around the edges as well, coming out of that blue, so I do overlap it a little bit, that's okay. And just add a few bits in this lighter bit here where it's a bit bluer, but there will still be a bit of brown. And on this edge here, definitely wash some into that indigo blue that we put down. And above up here as well, there's quite a lot of brown showing through. Make sure we curve it coming down here as well. Again, just smooth into the background of the edge here because it's quite dark. We'll add a bit more of darker brown in a little bit as well. And I'm going to take some into that indigo blue that we put down in that shadow bit as well. It's like we say, it's not blue, but we've now got some element of blue in it. But I'm going to make a bit of browny green there just to really mute it down a little bit. Now, if you don't want like a really hard edge on the white, you can just stroke a few little lines just to break it up a little bit into that white on that edge. And if you need to smooth it off, just do little circles. That's another thing, like here, if you want to just smooth it off, is it a bit too textured on the eye and just want it darker, just do little circles. That'll help to smooth it down a little bit more. We will obviously go back in and put in some reds and blues and other colours as we progress. So at the minute it's obviously quite browny, yellowy green going on. So I want to counteract that with my next colour and have either more of a red or more of a blue element to it. So you might say, well, which one do I do? Well, for me, looking at this, I think I want to get in some of more of that reddy tone around the pupil here, and into this dark section and on any edges. And then once I've done that, I want to darken up a bit more some of these dark areas and add a bit of that blue into the highlight as well, just so it's not quite so bright, and that will help then to gauge how much of the blue we actually want to put into the eye. But there is no one way of doing things. This is just my way of how I choose to do things. If you want to do slightly different order, then there is absolutely nothing the matter with that. It's a matter of choice, really. Now, I said obviously I wanted to get a bit more reddy purples going on just around this pupil here. Now, when I say ready, you might be thinking, gosh, there's no red in there. Well, if you zoom in on the eye and have a close look, there is like browny red sort of coming out here. So I've chosen a crimson aubergine for this, so a nice deep browny red colour, which will work well on top of the green, because don't forget, no matter which colour you pick, it will look slightly different on white paper to excuse me, on top of the green. Okay, so I've got my crimson aubergine, and I'm just going to look where those reddy brown bits are. So I can definitely see some here, so just use a very light pressure. You can always press a little bit harder once you feel your way as to where you're going with it. And I also want to take some down into that real bottom edge, where it's got that sort of reddy brown tinge to the eye, and just, yeah, it's a little bit, just starting to look for those little bits. Although we're not putting in teeny details, we are starting to look a little bit at some of those kind of areas, just to start introducing them in a little bit, just like there's a bit of the red just in here, tiny bit on the bottom, not much. Definitely want some coming out of here. Now I don't necessarily want to cover the whole area, hence those individual kind of strokes coming out. Just, there's definitely some purpley colours going on with those kind of browny reds as well. So, but that's okay, because purple's obviously made with reds and blues, so that should work quite well when we come to put some of that over the top. You have to think when you're layering about your colour mixing theory. You know, for example, if you're putting blue over yellow and you don't want green, you've got to be obviously very mindful that blue over yellow makes green, and whilst it's not like mixing paint, getting a consistent smooth colour, you will still, if you're using light layers and building them up, even some dark layers, you will find the colours underneath have a big impact on the colours you put down. So if you're ever not sure what something's going to look like, then I always use a spare piece of paper and just try different colour combinations out to see which one actually gives me the effect I'm really looking for. And some things work, some things won't, and that's okay, and that's why it's great to have the bits of spare paper to play with, just to see, because sometimes things don't always work the way you imagine them to. Sometimes they work better, sometimes they work worse. So I'm mainly keeping this kind of reddy brown colour just on those edges. And then just fade it gently in. And obviously where we said around the middle here. There, if you look carefully, there are a few tiny little bits within this lighter area, so add a few lines in there as we're building it up. And add a bit into this bit here. Now, what I'm feeling at the moment, having built up some of this eyes, this needs to be darker. I've reached a point where I feel like it does need to be darker. So I'm going to get an actual black pencil now. Not everyone likes using a black pencil. I personally think they're fantastic. While I don't necessarily want to use it on its own entirely, if I want a richness, I think it works very well if you add in the dark blues and reds and browns with it. But I think if you use a black mixed in with those colours, it does the hard work for you in terms of really achieving that depth, as it were. Now I am just going to start a little bit with this black, just starting to think a little bit about some of those shapes, just a little bit. I am using a firm pressure with this one to really start trying to build up that depth and get rid of some of those white bits showing through, but I will be a bit lighter on the edge. A bit like just to be watch my edges, and if you find, obviously because you're pressing a bit harder, you get loose bits, then do just stop and sweep them away. So while I'm not putting in all the edge hairs, I am just going to start thinking just a little bit, adding in a few of those darker bits, just to, while I'm here, just to kind of begin to not just have a rough edge quite as much. We will go back with some of the other greys and tidy them up completely, but just and as you don't have to press hard on those edge hairs either, because we, like I said, we will come back, but just to roughly mark in how far I want to go with that dark. And where I am certain it is really dark, then yes, I am using a nice firm pressure just to really get that depth in. See, I'm blowing and I should use the brush. The reason you should use the brush and not blow is that it's very easy to accidentally spit rather than just blow. Somehow I can never quite help myself. I don't know why. And just be careful on this edging here, how it's shaped. It's not quite so dark. Just which is another thing I want to do in a minute, is dull that down a bit, because it's not actually not so white. I'm going to just add a bit more grey to that, just to tone it down a little bit so it's not distracting. Also, I'm reducing my pressure on this bit here just lightly, adding bits of black into here just because it's not so black. So I'm reducing my pressure right down. Just where it is dark, obviously you can press a bit harder, but yeah, just fade it down a little bit. So I remembered that time. And then also in the pupil, I'm just going to add some of that. There is quite a lot of blue and purple going on here, but I don't want to lose it in amongst the other colours we've been putting on. So I'm just going to add a bit of black to keep the depth. Now you see, just by doing that, where I thought this was quite dark before, having made that darker, you can really see if it is dark enough or not, as the case may be. And yeah, I definitely do need to go darker to set that in, push it back to make it more 3D in the shadow from the eye, but we will work up to that. You can't just whack it all in at once. You've got to kind of build up the areas. So okay, we've got a bit more depth going on there now. Now I did say I wanted to do the highlight and that purple and a bit more blue and green in the eye. So there's a few things I want to do. I think what I might do actually before the highlight is I might just get my light aubergine, which is quite a muted purple, and I'm just going to add a little bit of that into that kind of more purpley section. Really study your photograph. If you're able to look at it on a tablet or something so you can zoom in, that really does help. Or if you can't do that, but you can print, then perhaps print it a bit larger, so you've got a normal sized one to look at, and then a zoomed in enlarged copy, so you can really kind of study the detail, as it were. Definitely going to add a bit into this, some lines here. And a bit down in places on those edges. Yeah. So I'm doing this, I can definitely see I need some blues in here and some more of that vibrant colours and some greens, and continue to really build it up. There's a few little bits of purple in here, but not so many, so I'm just going to add a few very lightly, a few bits into that. Okay, yeah, that's enough for now. I definitely want to get some of that green in before I do the highlight. Okay, so I think I'm going to try a couple of things. I definitely want to get some more greens and blues going on in here. There's some light blue as well, where it's kind of not a full-on highlight, but it's just catching on the lens here. I said I was going to dull that down as well, didn't I? So I think what I'm going to do first of all is I'm actually going to brush all the loose bits of pencil off my eye first, and then I'm going to get a dark phthalocyanine green and just try and get a bit more of that green in the eye, because I've lost a bit along the way, and that's okay. I can start building that up again. Again, just thinking about that shape of the eye, and I'm using a light pressure. And yeah, just thinking about where I actually want to add this kind of green. It's quite a mid-dark green, so I am going gently because I don't want it to all be this colour, but I definitely want some in places. Add a bit more variety, add a bit more green to the eye. Definitely going to add some in that darker section as well at the top, and I will go back in excuse me, I've gone croaky. I will go back in with a blue at a later stage up here as well, in that dark bit. I'm going to just add a little bit gently from the top down, just to kind of really set the eye in and get that sort of bit of a cast shadow coming in. And it's got a bit of a blue in the green, so I'm okay adding a little bit from the edge here where it's a bit more blue. And just, yeah, a few bits more in the mid blues, mid greeny sort of tones in the middle of the eye here. Let some of that light keep showing through, particularly where it's a bit more the light blue. We'll come in with that in a minute. But you can see just by adding that, it's obviously starting to darken it up and add a bit more green into the eye. There's actually a little bit in that browner section there as well, so I'll just add that in and down into that, underneath that middle kind of line. And also just that bottom edge, I'm just going to add just a little bit, not too much, there isn't too much going on there. Let's just give that a quick sweep, as it were. Looking at that, I think what I'm going to do now is, there's two things I'm itching to do. One is get some of this light blue in, and I can add a bit into the highlight while I'm doing it, and some in here, and some here. But I'm also itching this more of a purple, and I'm actually going to have a look through my collections of purples and choose a different one and mix it in with some blue in the highlight and around here. So I'm going to start with this light cobalt blue. Now here in this lighter section, it's kind of where the light is catching. I can definitely see some of that kind of glassy blue kind of going on in places. So I'm just going to do a combo of washing and stroking, just particularly on this lower section here. And I'm using a light to firm pressure, and also that will help. Being a light colour also starts to blend those colours in together underneath. And then there's definitely some coming from this side edge as well. So add a bit in here, and definitely I'm going to try and use a slightly firmer pressure just on this edge here, and small sort of little motions, washing motions, and I'm just going to blend those colours together underneath, try and get it a bit smoother as we bring that darker shadow out into the eye. Now, as I said, I was going to use this colour in the highlight as well, where we've got this white a bit. I can soften that edge off where it's a bit more hazy with this. as well. And I'm using the light cobalt blue. You've just got to remember the highlight is often, it's the reflection of what can be seen. And quite often, obviously, it's the sky, cloud, sky. You will obviously get other things there depending on where the object is, the animal, person, whose eye it is, what it's reflecting. But I'm thinking of it in terms of the sky. So I'm going to get a bit of blue in there. And I'm just going to start sort of thinking about that darker blue, but is here. Just wash a bit of this down. And because we've got the white underneath, it's not coming out too dark. Now, also if your pencil accidentally picks up the dark colour next to it, just on a bit of paper or a bit of blue tack, just clean that edge off a bit so you don't drag colours into each other where you don't intend to. Just so I don't want to lose all the highlight. If you've put in too much, then obviously don't worry. It's what we said about having the white underneath will make it easier to lift it back out again. So I'm just going to leave that for a minute, and I can come back into that. But I'm just going to add a bit of the blue coming out of that, just to start blending some of those underneath colours and adding a hint of the blue where needed as well. Oh yes, and as well I'm just going to add a bit on that bit we made very light white, just a little bit. I'm going to add a bit in there, and then I'll add a bit of grey as and the darker bits as well. Okay, so I'm going to get some dark blue, and I've opted for the Intensifying blue, which is a lovely rich dark blue. It's one of my favourites. So I'm going to actually start by putting some over this pupil here, and again, do keep checking the shape of what you're doing with it. It's easy. That's why I said to start off smaller, because it always ends up getting a bit bigger than it was anyway. But I'm also going to take some of this colour over the edge of that into the highlight. Now I am using a light pressure. It's quite a blue and it's on white. So I'm going to use a light pressure just to wash that. And if it goes a bit too blue, we'll add a bit of purple or red or whatever needs to be over the top. So I am just going very gently into that highlight. I can soften that and push that back a little bit as well, so don't worry if it looks a bit bright and a bit, we'll push that back. What I am going to do now though is I'm going to take some of this off into the green, where we want it a bit more bluey. Now I'm watching my angle, I'm getting that wrong. I need to soften that off and go around a bit. Particularly up in this shadowed section at the top here. Definitely going to wash some of that in, blend it more into the dark background that we've got above the eye, the eyelid. Smooth it off a bit, get rid of any of those white bits of paper showing through that we don't particularly want. And then I'm just gently gonna, don't want it too blue because I still want to keep that red, browns, Gently just stroke some of that on from the side here. Bring a bit of that into this purpley red bit. You can add a bit more red over the top just to push it down a little bit. It's definitely darker on this bit here, so add a bit of blue, and then I'm going to push that blue back a bit with some red and just a few strokes of blue elsewhere. Don't want it all blue, obviously. Just want to blend that slightly. I'm going to add a bit of blue just, and a few other bits of the white highlight as well, just very lightly. You can push that back and blend in those edges. So gently stroke, and again, where's my brush? Just brush it away a little bit. So what I am really feeling here that I'm itching to do is get some purpley tones into there. Now we did use the light aubergine, but for that pupil and just around it, I'm feeling I need a bit more purple, not more browny purple. So I think I might try, this is where it's good to have a scrap piece of paper, because you can just test it out then, because I've got a choice. I have two colours that I particularly like to use. Now I really like the violet purple range within the Derwent Lightfast. Now having looked at that, I've got a violet which is quite bright, or I've actually got a blue violet which is still a nice violet, but it's just a bit darker, bit of blue in it, which for the purposes of what I'm looking for in this pupil and the surrounding area, I think would be a better choice, having that bit of blue in it. So I've got a blue violet Derwent Lightfast here with a nice sharp pencil, a nice sharp lead, and I'm just going to wash some over the pupil first of all. Just get that in. I said careful not to make it too big, and then I'm going to just gently, using a lighter pressure, I'm going to wash just in places a little bit over that highlight, not too much. Want to keep it quite light, but there are a few bits, and then I'm also going to just add a few bits just around, not too much because it's not too purple, but there's just a few hints around there, and then we'll red it up a bit, as it were, in just a moment. So also, I know it's not purple as such, but deepen that, just edge off if you need to, if it's not dark enough. And again, I'm just going to add just a tiny bit on the edge, just where it's got a bit more of that sort of purple hint to it. Not too much. It's not really purple in many places, or bluey purple. Just a few little lines, just getting in a few tiny details now in amongst those tonal values, not too many, but we'll start to blend in a minute. So if you've just got a few of those in, it helps. But as you can see, just by adding that to the pupil and starting to add it a bit to that highlight, it's really starting to bring the colour into it a bit more, rather than it just be black. It just makes it more interesting. Just going to darken up that bit on the edge there again, same sort of thing. And it's okay, you can take a tiny bit into that white in places just to add a bit more to it, and then we'll pop a bit of grey over that in a minute, just so it's not quite so purple. And I'm just going to add just a bit just round the eye as well, and that black, just to deepen that up, and just add a bit into that as well. Oops, see, that's what happens. So your pencil's sharp and you press too hard, it will snap. Oops. Right, I've pretty much done anyway. So what I want to do now is I'm just going to get some of the Payne's grey, and I'm just going to gently wash it over that white purple area that we put down, just to blend it in a little bit more, just so it's not quite so bright, make it a bit more realistic. And also what I want to do is I'm actually going to go a bit lighter for this one. Rather than the 60% Payne's grey, I'm going to get the 30% Payne's grey, and I'm just going to gently, using little circular motions, just going to try and blend in a little bit of that highlight and mix those colours. Now I haven't got a white for this darker bit. I might use white on the lighter bits, but just on the kind of darker bit of the highlight, I want to mute down just a little bit where we felt it was a tiny bit bright, but I'm just going to add a little bit of grey gently, just in little circles, to blend it together. In places, just particularly on those edges, they're quite not so harsh. So I'm going to add just a tiny bit in places, just a little bit of grey, not too much, but there is just a bit on these lighter bits where the light's catching slightly. And if you're using a lot of lighter colour, but not white, because I don't want to pastelise it, but it just starts to blend some of those colours together slightly underneath. So not all over, but just some of those slightly more bluey bits that are poking through. Just take a bit into that green at the top, not too much, just a little bit. And then what I'll do is I'm going to get my white, and I'm going to just blend that highlight a little bit where we want to keep it a bit lighter. And it's also okay to go over the bit we've just put the grey over as well. Sharp pencil, medium pressure, little strokes, little circles. It's good for blending. And obviously if you want it to be a bit more white, then just press a bit harder if you've lost a bit, like that bit there. And again, if you get your pencil dirty, like I've got some blue on the end, just wipe it on some Blue Tack or draw on a bit of paper and just clean it off, so you're not dragging those colours. Now it's a little bit more kind of not so bright there, so I'm just going to blend that, soften that and gently and blend it out onto the other colour on the edge. Clean my pencil up and then just press a bit firmer where it's a little bit whiter there, and then soften off as I come to the edge. Mix those blues that we've popped down underneath. if you want to soften any edges that are a bit harsh, just go into the colour just gently next to it and just overlap slightly. Just clean my pencil. I'm also going to just add a little bit where there's a few bits here, not too many, but this bit here under the darker section, there is a little bit catching, just slightly. It's a bit more hazy. I'm just going to add a tiny bit there, just a little bit over that blue, just to soften it off a tiny bit, just to give it that more of a glassy feel. Now this bit at the bottom here as well is a bit more that way. Okay, now I do still feel we need a bit of the green. Now there's nothing to say we can't go back in with a green we've already used. We don't have to just keep using new colours. So I'm going to go, not for my lightest one at this stage, but I'm going to go for the one I used second, the chromium oxide green. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that in places. Just being mindful of how dark I want things, where I need to blend, where it needs to be a bit greener, where I don't want it too green, so I might just reduce my pressure down and add just a few strands, particularly where I've put this white in. You know, don't lose all of that, but you might just want a few little streaks, a few little lines, just to add a bit of that green back in. At the top as well. Particularly where you want to smooth things off, don't forget, you know, adding these extra layers gently and can just blend in a bit more. And don't forget the edges of your highlight. You know, some of them aren't quite so, some of them are more prominent, some of them are a bit more blended. And then I'm also going to go to my red. I'll get my crimson aubergine again, and I'm going to frost a bit of that around the pupil. So I'm just going to add a few little strokes of that on. Not all over, but particularly around the pupil. There's a bit more going on, and then just any few little bits in the details. A bit in this top section here. Now, if I wasn't videoing, I'd be turning my paper around, so I wasn't twisting my hand around quite so much. So there's nothing wrong with doing that. Move your paper around as you need to. But because I'm videoing, I'm sure you don't want me to have my paper moving upside down and all over the place. And bring a bit more of that red back into the edge here, just slightly. And actually, I would like it to be a bit more orangey, so I am actually going to get a new colour. I've got a burnt ochre, which is a browny orange, and I'm just going to, I don't want too much of this, but just mindful on this bottom edge. I'm going to add a bit of that in here where it's a bit browner. And then just a few bits in the eye, just to lift it a bit, give it a bit of warmth where we just want a bit of warmth poking through in places. Here, a little bit at the top, not all over, I don't want too much there. There is a bit on the side here, if you look carefully. It's all about looking and studying, seeing what you can actually see, not what you think you see. Okay, question for myself now. Let's stop a second and have a look. Now, as well as smoothing some of it off, which I know I need to do, but we'll come to that in a minute. Let's look and see if I got my darks dark enough. Have I got my lights light enough? Have I got my mid-tones all right? And I think that's the bit probably need to work on slightly, maybe. A bit more yellowy colour in there as well. So I'm going to go back to the green ochre. I'm just going to add a little bit in at the bottom here, not too much, but just in that bit there, and a bit at the bottom here. And also there's a few bits in here. I don't want to lose, I need to be really careful not to lose that bluey bit. So I'm going to go back to my light cobalt blue, and I'm just going to gently wash a bit more of that on in places, particularly in this bottom bit here, not all over it, but there's a bit at the side here, there's a bit here. I'll add a bit more on the edges of that highlight we've kind of got going on. And just not so much on this side, but a little bit. Careful to keep any light bits, but yeah, there's definitely some blue towards the bottom here. And again, like I said, this is starting to blend those colours as well, which is quite handy. I'm not altogether happy with the highlight, in truth. I think it just needs a bit more. I'm actually going to get the darker blue, if I can find it. The dark indigo. Let me just clean that off as well, because I've got lots of bits of stray pencil. So I'm just going to really think about that, not all over, just some of that highlight isn't that highlighted, if you know what I mean. It's a bit more pushed back. Mute the blue just slightly. I might just bring a couple of bits out of the eye, not too much, but just where it's a tiny bit darker. And any shadowed bits, just to put them back in slightly. Don't want to go too dark on the eye. That's a bit better. And then it's really just keep looking and going back over what you're doing, really. I'm going to get the Remsen aubergine again, just tidy up that little marks and edging. Starting to think about those details just a little bit in the eye now, to where you have to look really carefully. Any just little nuances, any just little lines that add in. Just take your time with this bit, like the first bit. These are the bits that bring it and really bring it to life, to make it look realistic. Just Now, let's just get a little bit of green on that. Just, it's a bit too red, so I'm just going to stroke a little bit of the chromium oxide green just to mute it down a little bit where I've gone a bit too red with the across the highlight there. And I'm also going to get out the light aubergine a bit again, that browny purple, just to add any little bits of little lines, little quirks. And I'm going to get my white again and just add a few bits over some of those we've just put in, just to glass it up a bit again. Not all over, just and then yeah, that highlight particularly. Just to shape it and tweak it and whatever else you need to be doing. And then I'm going to go back to my middle Verde Gris, the one we started with, and anywhere that it's sort of green but it just needs blending together a little bit, I'm just going to gently, rather than using a white, I'm just going to gently blend with my light green just slightly, just to smooth it off a little bit and give it a bit of more of a glassy finish to it. I'm not pressing particularly hard or anything, got a fairly light pressure, but I'm just doing little kind of backwards and forwards or circle motions just to blend some of those colours together. And by having a light colour, it just, while it obviously changes the colour slightly, it helps to keep largely what you've put down. I'm not going over those white bits particularly where it's highlighted, I'm kind of working around those, and I'm generally leaving a lot of the brown alone, but just you can blend it into that darker bit, just smooth it down a little bit, or if it's gone too dark even, using this lighter green just to blend into it to soften it off a little bit so it's not quite so dark, also works quite nicely. And same with the dark edges into the light, if you need to blend them in a bit, just very lightly, just you can do that, or any edges into the highlight, just softly, a bit of blending. And over those darker bits, that's okay. Just to help make it a bit more smooth, a bit more glassy, a bit more interesting. And then we can just go, when we've done that, when we can always add in some tweaks, or we need a slight shift in colour anywhere, then we can do that over the top. Now it's starting to get a bit smoother. And there we go. Okay, so having started to blend some of those layers together with that lighter green, it's coming together, but I'm just looking at it to analyse what do I kind of need to do to finish it off. Now for me, I'm thinking perhaps I could just do with a little bit more green around this darker section under the highlight here, just to make it pop out a little bit more, and also a little bit more of a brighter green in places, just a few of that sort of yellowy green just towards the bottom here, just to kind of really bring it alive. So I've got my chromium oxide green first of all, and I'm just going to gently, not too much, but I'm just going to gently wash a little bit of that on in place. It's just using those small circular motions to kind of blend it a bit, light pressure, because I don't want too much of it, but just want to add a bit in places to on this section, just to get a bit more green in, a bit more brightness, a bit more warmth. So basically anywhere you feel that's not quite perhaps got enough green, if it's a bit too muted in places, because we did obviously put some of the lighter colours on here, which is fine. We wanted to do that because there are obviously bits of light catching, but at the same time we also don't want to lose those areas that have got a bit more to them. So I'm kind of doing a combination of strokes here, some of the kind of lines, and some washing. So I've also got, as we talked about, more of that yellowy green. I've got my green ochre again. Now I don't want too much of this, but just have a look in places just where you might just want to add little snippets of it, particularly more towards the bottom, as it were, and a bit here. Now there is a lighter bit in there and I've kind of lost it, so I might just lighten that up in a minute if I can. I'll come back to that. So basically we're just going back through some of the colours that we've already got, just to add some final tweaks and just really lift it and bring it to life. And if you need to tidy up any of the edges of your highlight, then use, depending on how, if you're trying to brighten it or lighten it or dull it down a bit, you can use the white if you need to lift it out a bit more anywhere. Or so we've got a few bits down here, haven't we? I also said I wanted to lighten that bit. Now I might just try rather than lifting it with an eraser, I might just try gently with the white. Just, yeah, that's, looks, we've got a bit of yellow under it, so if we go over it with it, it'll just lighten it slightly, so that works quite well. We've got a few little bits here, not too much. It's just a slightly lighter bit. There. So if you use the white to lighten, just do it very gently, and then it won't end up so white. It will just gently lighten what's underneath. And I think looking at that brown, if I can just find it. No, that's my black. That's not what I want at all. You can never find anything when you're looking for it, can you? Hang on, is this it? Got it. Just want to add a bit more of the sepia just on this edge slightly. And bring that into just where it's coming in. We've got some blue there, and there is some blue, but I just want to add a couple of bits of the darker brown here, the sepia. You can add a few bits into the eye as well. Got that bit radiating off. again, if you want to just, I'm adding just a little bit here just to darken under that highlight, make it stand out a little bit more so there's a bit more contrast. A few gentle bits on this side as well. Doesn't need to be much, but just adds a little bit more interest to the eye. And a bit in this bottom edge where it's a bit browner. Over that pupil a bit. Yeah, that's definitely starting to come together a bit more now. If you need to blend anything, just remember, just gently do little circles over the top. There's a bit of blue in there. I think I might actually get my Payne's Grey 60% and just blend that a little bit there, and then I can always lighten a bit with that middle verde green just in places if I need to add just a bit of variation into it. It's a lighter colour, helps with the blending, or if you want a bit more blue then use the light cobalt blue. Is a nice pale blue, good for doing this. This really is just about little tweaks here and there, nothing too much, and just making sure it's nice and smooth and that you have the right amount of darks and lights and mid-tones, because while obviously we have got a few details within the eye here, it's more about getting those tonal values right as well, to make sure that that gives it its real shape. So yeah, I'm just reusing the same colours that I've got. So this is the chromium oxide green, the green ochre, and that's brown. I'm also just going to finish with the bit more red in here, that crimson aubergine, just a few little tweaks, not too much of that. Just in the middle and on those edges. Keep it gentle, keep it smooth. And that should just about be coming together. I think I might get the black again and just tweak, make sure I'm happy with the shape of the pupil. And that edge slightly. It is a we use that blue violet, so I think I might just get that out again and just soften that edge slightly. with that. My Payne's Grey 30, just to blend in the darker highlighted bit, as it were, and then the white on the lighter areas. And that's pretty much coming together now. Just check there's nothing you want to tweak. You don't want to obviously do too much. It's now just making sure it's all smooth, really. Using those lighter colours like this. This is the light cobalt blue, and the middle verde gris, just to make sure it's nice and smooth and glassy looking, and that you haven't got bits of white paper showing through. And then obviously those warmer bits we talked about with the your green ochre. Towards the bottom, just little bits. And then obviously we have that ready bit. I might just put a couple of lines in, not too many. It's kind of, don't need too much of this. I've got it fairly dark around here now. It's just there's a few bits of that red shining in places, not too much, because it's quite a strong colour as well. Just go very gently with it. You just want to correct the shape here slightly, just to lighten that edge a bit. And if you go wrong and go into the black and lose the shape a bit, don't worry, just get your black back and you can reshape as you need to. But there is some definite more of a ready, that crimson aubergine here, and a little bit is just coming in along. Get that sepia as well, just on that edge. Tidy that up a little bit. There's this dark bit of the eye here as well. Just make sure that everything's blended and that you're happy with what you're doing. Just going back over those colours, so I've just got my chromium green again, just to darken this side up just a little bit, because the light's obviously coming from this angle, so this side's in shadow a little bit more, which is where that Indian Throne blue is quite good, because it's just a tiny bit stroke. On in place. It's just a little bit, not too much, and very, very, very gently. And there we go. Now I can have a look at that. I can safely say I'm pleased, I think, generally with the dark areas. They're looking pretty dark, and I'm pleased that I've got my light areas are looking pretty light, not too light. The highlights aren't too crazy white. We've got a little bit in places. It's obviously whiter at the top here, and then it's catching a little bit here and here. Let's soften that one off a little bit, it's a bit harsh. We need it to be a bit, I've got the burnt ochre again, just tiny bit in the middle to add that to that reddy orange that's coming off, just a few little bits, not too much, and just a tiny bit in that bottom. It's a little bit more orangey. And that bottom bit there. And we've got our darks, and the only thing that I want to change is here, just break up that dark a little bit with lightening it a little, just a couple of strokes, just to give it a bit more variation. But generally these are just final kind of tweaks and shaping. I just want a bit more of that light cobalt blue just towards the bottom with a bit of the white, just to that kind of weird blendy where it's kind of just catching the light is just a little bit in places. And there we have it, we have one eye. Okay, so for the next bit I'm going to look at this section under the eye here, the grey section, and I have got a range of colours to use. I'm going to get the Payne's Grey 30% and 60% because they're lovely bluey greys, which I can see there. The black. I've also got the dark indigo, which was that really deep bluey black. Now there are a few bits of brown in places, so I've got my sepia as well, the deep brown, and obviously my white in case I want to lighten areas. Now we already started just putting a little bit underneath just to help us gauge the colours in the eye and the tonal values. So we've got some down, but I'm just going to plot in a little bit of this area here, and then obviously build up this section. So to start with, I'm going to use my Payne's Grey 60%, and I'm just going to make sure I've got the edges where I want them, and just got this correctly shaped and down into like this teardrop duck section here that's kind of sweeping down. So I'm just going to use a light pressure in case I make a mistake. And I'm just going to gently just wash on and think about those tonal values as well. Now I don't want to just put it on without looking and considering, because you will see obviously like here there is a lighter section there, so I want to just leave that, but there's a darker bit underneath, so I can press a little bit firmer there once I'm sure where I'm putting it, and then there's a darker bit here as well as we're coming down more into the fur area. So, and I'm only going to go as far down as that bit. I'm not going to do that black section completely down here at the second. I'm just going to work on this bit first. But that's the darker. So I'm just going to gently wash that on, thinking about the direction that the hair is actually going as well. So and even into here there's a few darker bits. I'm just going to position the outline a bit more carefully in that dark section and just blend it in here where it's a bit more blended in. Now we've started obviously putting in some of these black areas here, but we can just check. It's a good opportunity just to check we're happy with how we've got those edges. Now, you could go in with your back, but like I said before, I quite like to go in with something just a little bit lighter. In case I make a mistake, takes the pressure away slightly, and also it's good to have some other colours mixed in with the black, as we've seen before. Now I'm not going to do all of that section. I'm going to leave that black bit to come back to in a minute, but I just wanted to make sure I've got something on the edge, so then we can blend down and gauge the tonal values of these greys that we've got going on in here as well. So again, I'm just using a very light pressure, but it's not completely white. There's quite a lot of blue going on in here, so definitely might be adding some more blue. Having put that kind of down as a base coat, I can see I'm definitely going to need some more blue in there. And then just working under the eye, I'm just going to take the opportunity just to really study how I want that bottom line to be, because it's obviously not a smooth line. We've got bits of the hair coming out, overlapping on the white area. So I just want to stop and consider that for a moment as well. Just really think about that edge and which way the hairs are obviously curved and lying. Now I'm just going to sharpen my pencil. I just wanted to do that so I can be a bit crisper on those edges with the hairs. So I'm just looking, obviously I have that lighter section, but then it is a bit darker underneath the lighter section, curving around here. And obviously then we've got those hairs that we've talked about that are overlapping. Just look at how long they are or how short they are. Some are more prominent than others. I'm not particularly looking too much at the lightest ones. I'll go back in with a lighter colour in a minute with those. I'm just trying to get some of them plotted in, just to kind of start to give it a bit more structure, a bit more shape. And again, obviously we've got that lighter section there, but that is actually a little bit wider than I've perhaps put it. Just kind of making sure it's kind of a bumpy edge anyway, so it's not a smooth overlap. But that's already given us a good starting point anyway. Just by stroking on the individual hairs and flicking, when you do that, what's important to remember is to start the hair where it's growing out, and then you as you're doing it, you can reduce your pressure as you come towards the tip of it, where it's going to be more pointy, not so heavy. And by doing that, if you start at the point where your the hair is growing out, you can apply more pressure, and then you can reduce pressure as you come towards the end when you've got the flick, and it gives you like that. You can see there it's a bit thicker, a bit heavier here, but then it tapers off at the end. So by doing the individual strokes like that, you help to create a more realistic hair effect. And so that's why it's always important to look at the direction, but go from where they're growing out of the skin rather than the end bits into the skin, because they're easier to achieve a more realistic effect that way. So now I've kind of got that plotted in a little bit. I think I said I wanted to be a bit more blue. Now I'm not sure how blue at the moment. So I'm going to start with my dark indigo first, which was the bluey black, and I'm just going to see whether that will be enough blue or whether I'll need to get a slightly brighter blue. But let's just have a look, and I'm going to just wash gently, just in the same way as I did the Payne's Grey 60%. I'm just going to go back over the top, particularly in the darker mid to dark areas, but I'm still using a light touch in my wash. And again, I'm just doing little backwards and forwards motions, but in the direction of which way I want the hair to be positioned on the paper. And so we've got that darker bit under here, so I can press a bit firmer there, but not too much. And in these darker, really darker bits, you can see curving here, and then just a bit softer where you don't want it quite so much. And then obviously you've got this kind of mid-tones here, so I'm just going to go gently on those because it is quite a dark colour, and I don't want to go too dark. And into this, wash a bit into this dark bit here, because I'm not fully doing this dark section, but I want to fade it down into this slightly lighter bit. So by reducing your pressure and just washing between kind of the dark area and the lighter area with a light pressure, you can help to blend it in a little bit. Now I'm not doing the backwards and forwards when I've done that. You can do it, but I was just doing a few kind of stroke lift in places, just to kind of make sure I've been careful with keeping the darker section dark and the lighter section a bit lighter. And again, where you've got where you're coming up from the dark to the light, you don't necessarily just want to wash right on the edge. It's okay in the middle bit, but on the edge you might want to just stroke up again, just so you're tapering off those ends that are going over the white. And also you've got to remember when you do this that, you know, hair is not uniform. So while we're kind of going in the same direction, you don't necessarily want to do each line meticulously one after the other. You need to be a bit freer and just slightly alter your angle for each stroke. So it's still kind of going in the right direction, but just by moving like a degree each time kind of around, it just gives it a more natural effect as to how they're sitting. Because obviously you've got to remember, these animals, you don't go to the hairdressers or anything. This is all natural, so you know it's not going to be meticulously combed. There will be stray hairs going on, sweep those loose bits away. So, you know, do bear that in mind. And again here, where we're going over the edges, yeah, you can go over the top of some of those grey ones where you want the darker ones, but if they go a slightly different place to the ones you put down on the edge, then that's okay, because we need a variety of strokes at on the edge anyway. So the important bit is just to get those tonal values kind of right in this section first of all. Obviously it's not too dark, it's not quite as dark around this section here as it is obviously underneath the eye, so just reduce your pencil pressure a little bit. Like I said, you can turn your paper around as well if it makes it easier with how you got your hand positioned. Obviously, because I'm videoing, as I said before, I can't just twist my paper around all the time, but feel free to do that if it does make it a bit easier on your wrists. See, now that darker section needs to come out a little bit more here, I think, looking at it, just under the eye, under that light bit. I haven't got it quite wide enough here on that very dark section. Again, it's not a completely straight line. If you look, it blends in a little bit more here, it's a bit more jagged. And again, it's a good time if you want to just, if you've checked how you've got that light a bit, make sure you've, you know, if you need to tidy up the edge a bit, then feel free. It's a good time to do it now. I mean, as you can see, it's obviously starting to take shape, and we're considering the tonal values a lot, but it's still looking quite rough, and some people find don't go far enough when they're doing coloured pencils. You know, they might only do a couple of layers, and sometimes that is all you need, but people often find they haven't got the realistic effect perhaps that they're striving for, and it's simply because they've not gone far enough. And sometimes that's because they're afraid of ruining what they've already done. Sometimes they may not realise, or it's just lack of confidence. But like now is a prime example of, you know, I've got tonal values going on, darks and lights, but I can still see through the paper. It's not complete. So looking at this, I need to start bringing it together a little bit, and I've obviously gone from the lighter to the darker. However, I've not really touched those light, mid to lighter areas very much. So before I carry on with that dark, I'm just going to dip in with that, and I'm going to use the Payne's Grey 30%, and I'm just going to gently, not too much, but I'm just going to start washing a little bit of that in places in those kind of mid to light areas. Just to get some of the pencil down on the paper, so we can start building those up at the same time. And again, it's okay, this kind of area here we've put some dark on, but it's not fully dark. I can just add a little light wash over that just to blend it in a little bit with the surrounding areas, and just try to start gauging the right level of light and dark within those areas. So anywhere you've got the dark, but you know, it's kind of got that little hints of lighter, like this section around here. I'm just going to gently, not too much, but just gently begin to wash in that section a bit as well. Start filling up that tooth of the paper a little bit. and it sort of comes down into there. Now, the thing that I can see looking at that is I definitely need more blue. You know, the indigo blue was great. I've you know, good colour to use, but in Tomorrow's Middle I could just do with a hint more of that kind of bluiness to it. There's that kind of rich blue. So I'm going to get my Intensifying blue, which is still a dark blue, but it's not as dark as the dark indigo, and it's just a little bit richer blue, and not all over it because some of it is a bit browner, but if you look really carefully, this bit under the eye here, there is definitely some bluey tones leading into brown. This kind of triangle is more brown, but underneath it there is more bluey tones to it. So very sharp pencil, light pressure, just doing a few layers, and again obviously I can go into that dark area here, that's okay, but I'm going to then just gently stroke it down a little bit into that, some of that, not the lightest bit so much, or if you do, go really gentle pressure in places just to, and then add a bit to that dark. So okay, build that up as well. Having that just helps us then gauge how light or dark we want that bit to be. So you can go in those real darky bits here. We'll also add a bit of brown to that as well in a minute, but this section is definitely got some blue in, and I'm also going to add a bit into the darkest areas just to really start building that up, get rid of those kind of white speckles showing through the paper. And I can press a bit harder in the darkest sections just to help with that smoothing out process. Obviously that might look a bit too blue at the moment, but I am going to add some brown to that as well, which will kind of balance it out. So we can blend it in to that lighter bit, and then as you come down just reduce your pressure a little bit so there isn't quite so much, and then we can have a bit on the edge as well, and that nice kind of bluey grey, short little backwards and forwards motions with a few just light strands. I don't want to take too many of those strands into the edge, don't want it too blue, but and again just wash off, just lightly wash over that lighter section of it just to start filling it in a little bit more. See, that's already got that blue tinge in where we want it now. So I'm going to balance that out by using the sepia, which I just need to sharpen. Make sure I've got a nice sharp pencil. Now here in the corner of this eye obviously it's quite brown, so I'm going to add a bit here, and it's also quite dark, so I can press a bit firmer. We've then got that dark bit there, and then I'm going to use a lighter pressure, so I don't want to go too brown, but there's like that triangle of that's a bit more of a browny grey there, and I'm just going to fade that off by reducing my pressure a little bit, and then I'm going to take a little bit of that up into this darker section, and then just soften on that top edge. I don't want too much because this bit here isn't so brown. If you look, you can add a bit of brown in those darker bits here, that's okay. There is coming down towards more of a brown there, but just within that section it's definitely not quite so brown Just put some on the edges. And then I can add some into the darkest. Stroke some just gently into the darkest. Doesn't have to be all over, but just stroke some on there. Now I am getting quite a lot of pencil dust, so just swipe that away. And then this isn't so dark, so I'm just reducing my pressure slightly, just watching my edges. It's okay to have a couple coming out, but we don't want too much brown. It's more in that section. Just reduce your pressure right down, and then into that darker bit there, but just soften the edge coming into that middle bit, and then a little bit under the eye into that darker section there. Okay, now it's starting to take some shape. So we're kind of balancing between those dark areas and the lighter areas. Now for me, I would actually like to go in and look at these lighter bits again. Now I don't necessarily want to go white at this stage. I'm going to save that, but I would like to lighten it. So I have a choice of my Payne's Grey 30% again, or I could even use a little bit of light cobalt blue, which I might just try in this bluer section here, just gently, not pressing too hard at all. Now, because it's a lighter colour, as we talked about, and I was doing little circle motions with a light pressure, it kind of blends the colour underneath a little bit, smooths it off. And then I can just gently stroke a bit, very lightly, into blending that darker section. And now I'm going from the light to the dark with my strokes individually, so then you get the effect of that hair kind of between the two. If you look very carefully, we've just got a few very gentle pale lines there to give that kind of idea. And yeah, it helps just to start to blend a little bit. Now we've got a few layers down, just to smooth off this section here. Now we can go blend into the dark by using a very light pressure over the dark. We can just lighten it slightly in places where we need to, so it's not quite such a solid black. So just, if you have a look, it's a little bit lighter just in places. So I'm just very gentle. And if it goes a bit too blue, well, don't worry, we can add a tiny bit of brown on afterwards. That's not a major problem. And definitely in this light section here, just very, very gently, just little circles, little washes across that bit, just to have that lighter bit. Obviously it gets a bit darker further up, so reduce your pressure down even more. It will just lighten it just ever so slightly, and by having the blue rather than the white, yes, we are adding a touch of blue to it, but it's not quite as bright as the white, so we can save that bit just for the real lightest bits in just a moment. Now, if you feel that excuse me, you need a bit more brown in there, then, which I do, just in a few places, I'm just gonna carefully, particularly in these sort of darker bits down here, I'm just gonna wash a little bit more of the brown, just gently just so I have that balance between the two. And yeah, it's okay if you just overlap on the edges between the dark and the light. That will blend it on that edge where that's okay to do that. And if you want to sort of blend it in a bit more, just go add a bit on the top here, just so it's not quite so bright, and leave it a bit brighter here then. Also then going to add just a bit of black in places, just in the real darker areas. So just look for the darkest bits. It's not everywhere. Like I said, it's definitely dark under the eye in this left section here. So I'm just going to add a little bit more there, but I'm then going to just get my Payne's Grey 30 and just actually going to go over that brown bit just to blend it a bit. It is still brown, but because we've got the brown underneath, it will just make it a grey brown, which is what we want. So I'm just blending a little bit where still a little bit too much of the paper showing through for my liking. It's a nice light grey, so. And then I'm going to get the white and look for the lightest bits. Now, as we said, it won't necessarily be completely white, depends on how hard you press. If you want a real lighter bit, like here, then press a bit firmer. It won't make it white because there's obviously quite a lot of colour underneath anyway, but it will just make it a lot lighter. Or if you just want to do it just very gently, then it obviously just will soften it off just a little bit for you. And again, even in the dark section, if you just add a few strokes of hair, or lines for the hair I should say, it will just make it a bit more realistic and not quite such a solid mass. And again, this bit is a bit you've got a lighter bit here, so I'm going to add a bit into that bit there. Into that section, and I'm just gonna just tidy up my line here that I've lost a little bit. And again, just look for where it's catching that light. I'm just gonna go across actually to soften that off a bit. I was going the wrong way. Don't want that. And then the dark indigo, again, just to tidy up any edges into that white if you've gone a bit wider than you meant to, or if you just need to look and see, well, where do I actually really need just to add that darker bit. Now that's not so much blue on this side, it's definitely more grey, so I'm just going to switch to my Payne's Grey 60 just on this very left edge here, just to blend that in a little bit with the lighter area, particularly towards the top. And we'll sort that edge out in a minute into the white, but just about tidying up any edges. So I've just got my black again. I just want to not press too hard, but I just want to tidy up that edge slightly. And also on that edge, to me, there's a bit more of a bluey red going on. So I'm actually just going to get my crimson aubergine, and I'm just going to, on that very bottom edge, I'm just going to add a tiny bit of that crimson aubergine into that dark area, along with my blue violet, just a tiny bit, not too much, but it's just got that kind of reddy blue feel to it on that bottom edge there, and just tidy up those lines a little bit. Just make sure you're happy with that edge. It's okay. I'm just going to taking a tiny bit of red just into it, not much, just on the very edge, and into that kind of black bit on that area just there. By having these other colours into it, it just adds something. I might just add it onto that browny section there as well, that red, just to blend it in a little bit. And that dark area just gives it a bit more life when you've got a few colours kind of in like that. Now stop and have a look. Are the darks dark enough? Are the lights light enough? Darks I'm pretty happy with at this stage. The lights, I just want to put a few more tweaks, if I'm honest. Not many, but just if you look here, there's a few light bits. I just want to get my white and just add a couple of bits, and this bit here, just because this bit here looks quite the same tonal values on that I've done on that lighter bit, but actually if you look, there's a couple of places towards this bottom bit where it's actually a little bit lighter, and it blends a bit more across in that section. And if you need to darken it, then obviously use one of your darker colours, your blue indigo, your black, or your Payne's grey if you just need to darken off that top bit a bit more, so it's not all the same tonal values. Okay, so now I'm going to look at this white section of hair under the eye here. Now obviously within the white hair throughout the picture, the white hair isn't obviously completely white. If we left it just white, then it would look very dull and flat and just not very realistic. So this bit here under the eye is probably the whitest section, with a little bit here, but there are other colours within it if you look really carefully, such as there's some greys, there's bluey greys, and there's more browny greys, such as the French greys in this particular section. And quite often in white hair you will find other colours such as pinks and blues that you can include. Now the first thing I am going to do though in this underneath eye section is I'm actually going to use my white, and I'm going to put in the very whitest hairs, just so that we don't lose them as we're adding the other colours. So the first thing I need to do is to think about where the really whitest hairs are and look at the direction that the hair is actually going in. Now the first thing I notice if I start up in this top area here is there is a single hair that is going in the opposite direction to most, which I think is quite interesting. So I'm going to use, I've got a sharpish pencil and I'm going to use quite a firm pressure, and I'm just going to mark in that stray hair, which obviously you're not going to see very well because it's white paper. And the way you have to kind of do this is if you need to look at it from a slightly different angle, so you can see the light reflecting off there a little bit. And it's also wise, if you start at one area, you can work your way down so that you don't lose your place and what you've actually drawn. So there's a few little hairs here, so I'm just going to start by drawing them in using a firm pressure on these whitest bits. I'm obviously not putting in all of the hairs. I'm just going for keeping some of those whitest hairs. Oh, see, now if you press too hard, then your pencil will snap. I'm just putting in some of those whitest hairs and looking at the direction that they're going in. And this way we can help to keep some of that white. And using a firm pressure, it will help when we put the other colours on the top. It will resist them a little bit. It keeps it easier to keep them clean. So just slowly kind of work your way around and look at how they're curving as well. You have got the odd one going in the opposite direction, so that's quite useful to get those in. And just use your blue tack as well, just to lighten the pencil line if it's a bit heavy. So you don't want to obviously draw over the pencil line with white, because you will keep the pencil line underneath it else and you won't be able to get rid of it. So I'm just on those real whitest bits, just putting some in just to start us off. I'm then going to start from the lighter sort of colours again. Now what I do notice is that it's a bit more sort of bluey grey this end, and this corner here is more of a French grey, the browny grey, and there are little bits of the browny grey in here as well. So what I am going to do is I'm going to get my French grey 30%, so it's not so strong, and I'm just going to gently stroke on, coming in from this darker grey bit that we put in earlier. Because if you look, it's not like a solid white line. This is where you tend to get the other colours coming through, where the hair is overlapping a bit more. So I'm just going to pop on, particularly down here where it's switching from the white to the more of the browny orange colour. So I'm going to just gently stroke a bit on there. Now when I'm stroking, I'm not so much washing, I'm stroking, and again I'm going from the point it's growing out of the tiger to the tip that way, because then as you stroke, you're releasing your pressure as you come towards the tip and lifting your pencil off, which gives a nice tapered effect with your pencil. So just gently stroke some on, particularly just underneath this dark section that we put on. And because we are losing a light pressure, and if you pressed firm enough with your white, you won't end up covering it all. And also I'm going to put a bit on the bottom where it's crossing over into the black underneath, which we'll put in a moment. I'm just going to add a tiny bit around there as well. Again, using a really light pressure when I do this. Now there is like a black line coming in here. I'm just going to press a bit harder there, just so I don't lose my positioning of where I want that dark edge to be, which I'm going to pop in a second, just so I don't end up losing. And as we said, it's more of a blue grey up there, so I'm actually going to switch to my Payne's grey 30%, and I'm going to start down here and kind of add a bit over this middle bit of where we put the French grey down, just so it's not like one then the other. There's a bit of overlapping between the two, and I'm just going to stroke on from the dark, so I'm actually, my pencil is touching in that dark section and dragging it out into that light section. And look at the direction that the hair is curving around, and the same up here. We've got some grayer bits just here, so I'm going to just stroke a little bit on there, and you'll see it is, if you're pressing lightly, it is resisting some of that white pencil we put down a minute ago. So I'm just going to gently stroke on the edges here. Now we've started to put that in, but before I go any further with that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to find this dark edge underneath so I don't lose it, and I've got my Payne's Grey 60%, and I'm just going to gently just work out where that edge actually is to make it a bit easier with the white. And also, as we same principle when we did the eye, is white on white, when you're trying to get the tonal values right, will look very different when it's next to a dark area. So we want to get some of this dark down just a bit, just so we can start gauging those tonal values in the white a little bit, make it a bit easier. So I'm just going to roughly plot in with this Payne's Grey. The important thing at this stage is I'm not pressing too hard, light to medium pressure, but I am thinking about which way the first strokes are going. So that's the important bit, is when you're plotting it down, although we're being rough and not too precious about it, just have a look at which way you want those strokes to be going, so it'll make your life a bit easier as you go along in a minute. Just look how the bits where it overlaps, some of them, those darker bits, are sticking in to that white area more than other areas. As you can see, I've not, although I'm trying to cover the base, I'm not, you know, I've done it in a fairly rough way because I'm just trying to plot it out at the minute and work out where I actually want lighter and darker bits. Now we have got some here, so I can kind of start adding a bit into here, that darker colour. By doing some individual strokes into the white, you can begin to shape that edge a little bit. Now coming down here, obviously it's not completely black, but there is a slight darker area, so I'm just going to put a few strokes of the dark in, just so we don't lose the edge and we kind of know where that white is generally finishing. Now whilst I've got this darker grey, this Payne's Grey 60%, I'm just going to add a few bits in where it's darker into the white from that dark area we put down earlier, just to so we don't have any sort of weird looking hard random edges. We can shape it in a little bit and soften into that dark area to blend it in where we need to. So you won't need too much, but just where there's a few lines, you can just tidy them up a little bit and just yeah, look at where it's darker and just, yeah, a bit more blending and shaping. And there's just a few, you don't want too much of this dark, but there are a few little strands up here. And as you can see, it's starting to take shape a little bit more now. What I am going to do, because I still want to make this bit darker at the bottom, is I'm going to get my black and I'm just going to wash a bit of this in. Now you can see, excuse me, you can see that just by having the black on the grey, I know I've obviously not got a really firm pressure, but it's different to where we've added the other colours in, like we did here, where it's really intense with the blues and the reddy browns and things. It's quite different. So that just shows you why I like to add other colours to my black. But just by popping this down now a little bit, just to begin to kind of get that darkness to it to help us gauge the lighter tones, we can then obviously just build up on that intensity in those colours. And again, you want to keep your pencil quite sharp when you're doing the individual strokes, and mine's getting a bit round, so I'm just going to give it a quick sharpen. That's better. You can see it's nice and sharp now, which will just help me define those edges a little bit more. So don't forget to stop and sharpen your pencil as you need to, because I know it's easy to just get carried away and keep going and forget. No, I'm just gonna, you can wash it in the really thick, the wider bits. Again, we are just kind of building up that block of colour there, but yes, when you want to get those finer edges, then use a few individual strokes to just help you. And it's obviously not quite so dark here, so I don't need to press quite so hard on that little bit there, but you can just start shaping a little bit. And again, if you've got any really dark bits coming out of that section that you think need a bit more tweaking with the black, then just take the opportunity just to kind of tidy those up a little bit. And soften it off here, not so hard in that bit where it's just getting a bit lighter, but I'm just going to go back over the really darkest bits just to darken them up a little bit, pressing a bit firmer, just to help gauge that white bit. Just simply by doing that, you can see how much brighter now that white area looks, even with those bits of grey that we have put in. So I'm going to go back with my French grey, 30%, and I'm just going to start to blend out a little bit more on this browny grey edge here, and just add in some strokes just on those edges. By working at both areas at the same time, it's quite helpful to do that. You can just keep looking at the direction, and you might have a few very light bits within that middle section just to break it up a little bit more. And if you make a mistake like I have there, put a pencil stroke where I didn't mean to, I'm just going to get my blue tack or your putty rubber, and you can just dab it, wipe just very gently just to soften it off a little bit. So then you can go back over. Now I'm going to switch to that Payne's grey again, because up here it is definitely a bit more of a blue grey into this edge here. Kind of gives you that transition between the dark and the light areas. if I rub gently, I'll kind of see that little white hair that I put in earlier. This is where you can tell if you've actually pressed hard enough with your white pencil or not. It's worth having a practice on a piece of paper, even a separate piece of paper, and just with your white practice drawing some lines in different pressures, and then going over gently with a like more of the side of a pencil, and seeing if it resists that white. It'll give you an idea then of how much pressure you do actually need to use. Now I can see here I just need a bit more shaping within that dark area that we've got here, so I'm just going to go back to my Payne's grey and just go in a little bit more with that and start to tidy up that edge a little bit more. It's all relative, really. What might look light when next to white, or dark next to light, when you put it actually next to a dark object, it can look very very different. So I definitely want to get some more of that French grey in. I've now got I've got a darker French grey this time. I've just got the normal French grey, so I'm just going to add a few of the really browner lines just more towards this bottom edge, just lightly. Just let a few little bits of the white poke through. Just by overlapping, slight different direction of the hair growth, just changing direction just makes the hairs look like they're overlapping each other then. So I'm just going to go back into that dark area there, and I'm going to get my dark indigo, and I'm just going to wash a bit of the dark indigo over that, using a medium to firm pressure over that, some of that darker area here, just to kind of intensify it a bit. Now I'm not going to press so hard this end. There is some browny red in there as well, so that's one reason, and the other is obviously it's not quite so dark, so just press a bit lighter in those areas. Watch your edges as well. You can put the odd strand in and just make it look like that white is overlapping the black there. So but just by going over, you can see the difference already in the intensity of how the black is looking. And just fade out. And like we said, it's a bit browner, a bit more of a reddy brown this end, so I think I'm going to get my sepia and my crimson aubergine. I'm going to get my crimson aubergine first, and I'm just going to gently just wash a little bit over towards this end where it's a bit more reddy brown. And use a very light pressure because obviously I don't want to go too red into this area, but I can take a little bit down into that where it's kind of that pinky colour coming in. Here, so, and we will obviously come back and work up that bottom of that section later, but I've then just got my sepia. I'm going to wash a bit over just to darken it up a little bit. blend that bit out a bit more. And again, you know, just do a few strokes into that white to make it look like the white is overlapping the black, like so. I've actually decided as well to use that crimson aubergine and just add just a few little light strands coming from that dark over some of those other bits, those grey bits here. Not all of them, but just add a few, just adds a bit more variation. It's just kind of this middle section here. You can see some, and just a little bit in places, not too much there, just adds a bit more variation, should we say. Makes it look a bit more interesting. And there are little bits of I've gone for the reddy colour because you can see it's like purpley reddy bits that are where they're overlapping. So we've used some blue, so then if you use some red, that kind of works well together to get that kind of natural purpley grey effect. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to sweep away some of those loose bits of pencil. Now in this white section, obviously we do want to keep it white, but I just want to tidy it up a little bit. So I'm going to use a white and a Payne's grey, and I'm just going to give them a sharpen. So I've got nice sharp clean points for doing this, and I'm just going to go down and I'm going to just try and tidy up any edges that need tidying, and just gently add a few loose sort of strands just in the middle to break up that white a little bit, getting the shadow underneath the strands of hair that are catching the light. And I'm going to add some into this browner section here, but this is still some grey blue in there, so we can add a bit of that in and just tidy up a few of those strands. And I've also got the white as well, but actually before I do that, what I am going to do is, if you find, oh no, I've put too much down, I'm not happy with that, well then you can always use one of your eraser options. So what I'm going to do is, here I just think, oh, I've lost a few of my white hairs, I want to pull them back. Now because we put the white down in places, it will make it much easier to lift off any extra of the grey pencils we put down, because we put them down lightly. Now you could use the different erasing options that you can use to lift out. I've gone for my Tombow Mono eraser to start with, just because it's nice and fine and it gives me a bit more control over where I want to lift. So I'm just going to use mine to gently kind of stroke across those hairs that I don't want to lose. Like, I know I put a line in here, so I can gently go across that and lift that out. And I know there's a few individual strands I put in here, and you can kind of see as you're lifting them, you can feel and see where you put some of that white pencil, and by stroking in the direction that you put the white pencil, you can lift some of it off. And don't worry if you lift off too much, because we can always just go back and put in those finer white lines to tweak. So just anywhere where you think, oh no, I have got too much down, it's not quite as white and bright as I would like it to be, just stroke with your Tombow, just gently. You don't even need to press hard, because that white pencil we pressed firmly will make your life much easier to clean the paper. It's a good little tip for you. So just clean off those loose strands of hair. Now you can see it's already lifting off some of the brightest bits, and then I can go back with my Payne's grey and then I can just tidy up any edges, like those final tweaks as it were, of around those strands of white that we want to keep in. We can just tidy those up first of all, and the other thing you can do is, obviously, if you've got too much white, just gently go over the top with the grey, and it will just knock it back a little bit. So where you want it to actually see a line, press just slightly firmer, but where you just want to mute the white a little bit, if you've got too much, then just press very gently over the top, and just take the opportunity to tidy up those edges a little bit. And where the white is overlapping the black here, where it's a big clump, you might get a nice bright white, but on those kind of individual hairs where it's overlapping, there's a slight grey tinge to them because of the black underneath. And the same where the black is overlapping the white at the top, that's why it goes a bit grey, because you've got them mixing together. Add a bit more grey into that section here. This is why it's important when you put down the white at the start as well, that you really think about where you're putting it, because it does make it a little bit easier to sort at the end. And then the white, like here, I could probably do with just sorting that white line out. I can use a sharp point, and I can, while I'll never get it completely white, which is fine because I don't want it too bright, I can just add in a few little lighter strands, as it were, just on the end, so they're not so bright as well, and into the dark here. Again, see, if the pencil's very sharp and you press hard, it will snap. I do that a lot. You'd think I'd learn. So you can do it vice versa as well. Just, you won't get white, but if you just need to tidy up, get the odd little bit. And the same on this side. Or if you just need to extend out any of those white lines into the black, and you know we talked about how it goes grayer, just if you go follow any of those strands, if they're not sort of fine enough at the end, then you can just follow them out onto the black, and it will just make it grayer. Also, you will find your pencil gets dirty though, so do make sure you keep stopping and cleaning it, because obviously if you're going into the dark, it will lift some of that onto your pencil. So do stop and either do it on a piece of paper or a bit of blue tack or something, just to clean them up a little bit. And what I just want to do now is actually get my black again. No, that's not it. Trouble is, they look quite similar sometimes with some of the other dark colours, and you can just, I'm just going to tidy up around any of those little strands I've just drawn in, just make them nice and neat and tidy basically. And just by going around them as well, you can make any stand out if you want them to stand out, or if you don't, then just go over the top of them to push them back a little bit. And the same here, works on both sides. Just this is all about just tidying those edges. It's getting those final kind of tweaks that really brings it all back together again. And then, yeah, using any of the colours that we've previously used, if you do find you just need to tidy them up, use your French grey or your Payne's grey, and just just tidy up into edges or push back any of that white a bit, just to make it look a bit more realistic. Having it overlapping is what's going to make it look more realistic. And there we go, we've got some white hair that's not pure white under the eye, so sweep that away, and there we go.